Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, I just want to share something that's kind of cool, okay? So, last year, in late October, my sister visited from Florida. And while she was here, she bought all these pumpkins, because she wanted to do pumpkin painting with my nieces and nephews. And I have a lot of nieces and nephews, all right? And so after everything was all said and done, she still had a lot of pumpkins left over. And some of them were really, really, really big. And she gave me two of them. Now, listen, I was really hype about her giving me these pumpkins because it's not something that I would buy. You know what I mean? They were very large. So I know they would probably be, pretty expensive from a farmer's market. So I brought them home and I put them on my porch to be like, kind of fall festive and stuff like that. And don't you know someone stole one of my pumpkins a couple days later? I was so upset. My feelings were legitimately hurt. Like it really, really, really bothered me because I've been living in my home now for over like 9 years. And I've had so many packages delivered. I've never, ever had anything stolen from my porch, And so it just amazed me that someone stole a pumpkin. Now, this is what's interesting. So anyone that knows me knows that I do look at life in a lot of ways very prophetically. And what does that mean? Well, prophecy basically is what God is saying, right? And he can speak in so many different ways. There's actually a scripture that says, all of creation reveals the glory of the Lord. And so don't you know that the Lord planted a pumpkin plant in my garden this year? This is a true story. I did not plant any pumpkin seeds. As a matter of fact, I told my daughter last year with the one last pumpkin, I told her, I said, when it got really like old and starting to rot, I said, go take it into the backyard and put it against the fence. I said, who knows? Maybe some pumpkins will grow back there. But that's not what happened. The pumpkin plant is in my front yard. And so I want to show it to you. Okay, here we go. All right, so that's my pumpkin plant right there. All that big bunch of leaves. This is the first year I didn't plant any new plants. As you can see, it is massive. I actually had to trim it a lot because I figured if I wanted it to actually produce pumpkins, I had to trim the vines back. And so I'm going to show you some of the pumpkins that are growing. Now, a few weeks ago, I had 5. I counted 5. But then I've been watering it here and there. There's another one and another one and another one, And these 2 popped up right here, these green ones that weren't there before. So that's 7 if you're keeping count. And that's 8. So I have 8 pumpkins in this beautiful pumpkin plant. I'm glad that I could share my pumpkin plant with you. I wanted to share it because it's not a coincidence. This is something that the Lord did, and he did it to encourage me, and he did it as a prophetic word over my life. And what's really interesting is originally when I counted how many pumpkins I had, there was 5. And I was okay with that. 5 biblically represents grace. So 5 is a good number. I like numbers. I'm a number girl. I like the number 3, 5, 7, 8, 12. There's just certain numbers I like. And so I was okay with 5, but I was a little bit disappointed it wasn't 7. Because 7 to me represents, perfection and God. But when I came out here a couple weeks ago and saw that the pumpkin plant produced 2 new pumpkins, I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then I realized there was a 3rd pumpkin that was new, which brought me to 8. And 8 is an even better number and for my circumstances, because that usually represents new beginnings. And just the plant itself is a picture of like fruitfulness and abundance. There's a scripture that says, you will reap where you have not planted, right? And so I'm just encouraged by God putting this plant in my yard. And so if nothing else, I just hope you think, how awesome God is and start to wonder, in your life's circumstances, and things that are going on around you, what is it that God is speaking to you through those things? Because he does that. He's an amazing God and he's not limited. God bless.